What's up? My name is Zeakin, and what you're about to hear is a conversation I had with High Charisma's guild leader Duwerq, who was probably one of the best GMs in all of Wrath of the Lich King. Why do I say that? Well, I guess you're gonna have to listen to find out, but in full transparency, Duwerq is also my best friend in real life, so perhaps I'm a bit biased. In this conversation, we discuss and reminisce about the good times during each phase of the expansion and dive in a little bit on some of the personalities that made it so great and truly a twice-in-a-lifetime experience. Enjoy. I kind of told you a little bit about why I wanted to do this, but I wanted to make this, do this interview and make a video about our final time, our final days in Wrath of the Lich King. Just because, as we've said, it's like a twice in a lifetime experience, and it would be worth it to record that and to be able to look back on it. But one thing that obviously I didn't do was just record all of the stuff, before the last little bit of our time playing. And so what I wanted to do was to just talk to you and have something that people can look back on as a way to remember the good times before, Cata ruined everything. But so I guess for those, this is going to just go on YouTube and just exist. So if for whatever reason people find this video and are curious to watch it that aren't a part of High Charisma, why don't you go ahead and tell us who High Charisma is and what it's about.
So, High Charisma was founded back in TBC pre-patch by a guy named Cressens. So Cress ran the guild with his brother and a couple of his other buddies, and basically built it up in TBC pre-patch, where I was just, looking in trade chat, little scrub me, and I was like, oh, those raid times look decent. So that's when I joined, and then we started raiding in Wrath pre-patch. It just that, we did Karazhan 10-man, and then basically just got built as we leveled up through Wrath, and it was just built as a Wrath guild. Cress eventually obviously left, and then I took over.
So then you started raiding with these guys, and obviously we had been talking, and I know that one of the things that you always said is, and you've probably been saying this for a decade at least, it feels like, that if they ever brought back Wrath of the Lich King Classic, that you would come back. And this was around the time that original vanilla had been launched. And so tell me about, I guess, because you kind of went from not gaming at all to playing Wrath of the Lich King 5 days a week, pretty much, maybe even 6 and towards the end of it. So tell me a bit about what that experience was like to come back and play this game that you loved as a kid.
So, obviously in high school, Wrath is my one true love. And I really don't play generally multiplayer games. I've played plenty, and I tend to play them, pretty well. But that's not really ever been what I've been interested in. But for some reason, just Wrath of the Lich King for WoW is just my favorite. Just absolutely love it. It just feels perfect. Feel like the class balance feels perfect. So we played it, as kids, and then Cata came, and I just completely lost my interest in the game. But then, so I remember, because I don't even follow games really, and so you came over to my house and told me, hey, they're relaunching Classic. Wow. You're like, maybe, they'd go back to Wrath. Would you play? And I was like, oh, in a heartbeat. There's nothing that would stop me from playing Wrath of the Lich King if they re-released it. And so, once they did TBC, I felt like it was inevitable. And so they did TBC, and so I started prepping myself all right, okay, I'm actually going to do this. Life was getting busy, had a kiddo, the whole thing, but I was like, I got to do it. I can't miss it. So, yeah, the second that they even announced it, I told my wife, and I was like, babe.
Babe, listen.
Do you remember that game? That game I told you about, 8 years ago. And,
yeah, little did she know. Little did she know what she was signing up for.
Yeah, she had no idea. No idea.
We should back up, and you should tell the story of how you even got into WoW back in the day.
Yeah. Okay. So same thing. I think even back then. I played probably more multiplayer games back then, but that was back when the internet just kind of it sucked, and I was living in my mom's basement because I was 15, 16. Mm-hmm. And played Call of Duty 4 and a little bit of Halo 2, Halo 3, but just kind of games like those. And then Zeakin tells me, and he's like, hey, you should play WoW with us. And you know, WoW is something, when you first look at it, it just doesn't look good. It really doesn't look like a good game. But fortunately, you know, I stuck through it, and there's little me, and I'm clicking on, remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and the hyphen. And you're like, dude, no, like, move your hand down. And fortunately, God bless, you told me to move my hand down, and so I re-keybind everything to the other stuff so I can actually play. So my first leveling experience was a Draenei warrior, and I knew nothing about the game, and I feel like none of us did, because that was kind of the magic of it back then, is nobody knew anything about anything. And so I remember trying to level as a Draenei warrior, and I think I was leveling his arms, and I had like a two-handed sword. I didn't know how to like right click on stuff. I was wearing leather armor that was broken. I didn't know how to repair. I was in like grays and greens at like level 30. Like, no clue. Absolutely no clue. I don't know how I ever even made it to max level.
I actually forgot you got to max level as your warrior.
I didn't. No, so that's
okay.
actually it. Yeah, so I think that's the thing that reinvigorated me. Was at 55. I was able to switch to a Death Knight.
Which is hilarious to think about. Of all classes, the Death Knight.
Played a Death Knight named Dask, which is an awful name that I think I came up with when I was like 10 when I played Halo. So played that, got it to 80 as like a blood DK because I was obsessed with the lifesteal. Thought it was super cool because I was so used to dying as a warrior, and so I was like, oh, I can actually like death strike stuff back up to full health. So got that to 80. We were in a guild named Army of Helaman.
I always forget about that.
Which was a Mormon guild on Kael'thas, the server. And so I get to 80. I do one raid on it, and I'm like, nah, this isn't for me. So immediately, I think I leveled it. I think it was a Paladin was the first one that I leveled. But I leveled the Paladin, started healing, and then that was it. That's when I just fell in love with the game.
That's so funny.
Second I casted a heal, I was like, this is it.
This is me. This is who I am now. I'm a healer. And yeah, you pretty much almost exclusively, with the exception of like this go around, you've played a Shadow Priest quite a bit and a warrior, actually, which was a bit surprising to me. I never thought I'd see the day that you'd play a melee class, so that was kind of surprising. I mean, I guess you did back in the day, like you said, but just I never thought I would see you revisit that.
It's hard to qualify my playing that first time around. That was just leveling. I leveled as a melee class because I knew nothing else. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing with that is the first playthrough, I had every healer. You know, I had priest, shaman, druid, and paladin. And so I had the 4 healers, and that's all I did. Never DPS'd a single raid ever. And in Naxx, so you know, when obviously Wrath Classic came out, I had no intention to ever DPS. And so I leveled all the healers again. And I just healed all through the first, first tier that came out. And then I think out of necessity almost, in Ulduar, I was like, all right, I'll play Shadow because there's so many fights in Ulduar that you drop down to 2 healers. You know, you drop down on Hodier and like Iron Council, you had to drop healers and just tons of them. The goal was drop as many healers as you can, and so I was like, well, if you're a flex healer, you gotta do it.
Yeah, and I was pretty happy to see it just because I feel like there's the only thing I haven't done is tank, but I feel like even healing and DPSing was just made the game so much more interesting and kind of opened that up. And
the craziest part about that, and this is almost blasphemous to say, is the most fun I had in the entire expansion was playing a prot warrior tank. And like,
yeah, that's wild.
My wife would come by and she'd be like, what are you just giggling about? And it's me playing prot warrior in like, you know, just garbage like Naxx Rammus and Ulduar, just having an absolute blast. It is so much fun. It's just too bad it sucks.
Yep. So tell me then, I think it would be fun to just go through each of the phases and maybe just, you know, remember some of the fond memories of that time, and maybe some of the characters or just things that you remember about each phase. Because like, I mean, phase one feels like forever ago, so I hardly remember some of phase one.
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
basically.
That's crazy. So
that was 2022. So like August 2022 was phase one.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
So,
insane. So tell me a little bit about what you remember about phase one.
So phase one, obviously, I was just like little script me. I don't know anything. I'm just playing Holy Paladin. And so I remember just kind of power leveling, and the guild was all power leveling together. And I mean, this is before I even thought about rested XP. And so I remember just leveling, and you were in Discord with me. I found a spot in Grizzly Hills that was like a hyper spawn, and I sat there for I think 4 hours straight, just killing mobs. And I'm like, looking back at that, I'm like, there's no way that was efficient. I just sat there killing mobs. But I mean, so yeah, we're all power leveling. We're doing a little bit of dungeons together. But week one, I think like 14 of us were 80. 14 of our committed 25, and I don't think 5 of them ever ended up leveling, but 14 of our committed 25 were 80. And so Crescent's, the old GM, goes to trade chat to try to find people, and he gets whispered by like 15 DKs and 15 rep paladins. And he's like, oh, we already have like 8 of each of those. Like, I'm sorry, we can't have any more. And then week one, we kill a couple bosses, and then Patchwork just bricks us because the tanks get literally one shot, like just exploded. And so we're like, okay, we'll regroup. But then by week 2, we had an awesome guild. And so it was, I can't even remember all the names of everybody, but we had a core 12 through the entire expansion pretty much. So 12 of us stayed pretty much the entire time. And then we had Wiccan and her crew, which was a boost, and then Crest and his boys. And I remember week 2, we just came in and mopped the floor with everything, and me and you were both like, wow, it's actually, this is actually going to be a good time. Like, we actually have a good guild that we can go through this expansion with.
Yeah. I was just going to say, yeah, I remember early on having the thought that like, oh, wow, like this is a group of people that we will go through the whole expansion with. And I remember, I think, of the first memories I have of raiding, I think Perp was the one that stood out the most. And I remember you and I Perp drank, for anybody who knows. But it's funny because you and I think the first thing you said to me about him was he's really funny or something. And I know that by saying this, Perp, it's going to like gas him up and he's going to like feel really good about himself. But like, I just remember that was one of the things that we talked a lot about, was just the characters of the guild early on and how fun it was to just raid, because the content, for anybody who knows, like the content wasn't hard. It was challenging to like a degree as you start to like remember the fights, but after that, like it feels like after week 2 or 3 it was like trivial, and that the only thing that was hard at that point was somehow for us, shocking, the achievement on Thaddeus, and then never getting immortal, which still feels bad. Like we even went for it in phase 4, and we'll talk more about that later. But I just remember all the personalities, and I remember also being really annoyed by Dusk Dude, now Shout of Earth, and just that his microphone just like really irritated me, because the quality was just like so bad. But again, like as time went on, these people ended up being like the core group, and people that I, even after World of Warcraft ends, whenever that is for me, like those are the people that I still want to play games with. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. So that was you went into a pretty good tangent there, but with the characters. So I remember we did the like week 2, and it was like, all right, this is a good group. But we did a 10-man, and that was my first actual interaction with Perp, because Perp was pretty quiet. Other than that. And I was like, this guy is so damn funny. And the whole time I'm just, giggling, just doing my best to heal, because I'm not doing anything resembling a raid lead at this point, or a GM. I'm just playing Holy Paladin. And so that was fun, that first 10-man. And then the funniest part, so we had Blau was one of the other officers, and he was the one outside of Cress's like OG friend group that was an officer. And so he took it upon himself to do a 10-man, which I'm trying to remember the name of it.
It starts with a T, but I don't remember.
Tenfold.
Tenfold. Okay.
So he does the tenfold 10-man, and we raid at 10:30 p.m. server time. And this group raided at like 5 or 6 in the morning.
That's right.
Like
I
the most
that.
absurd window. You know, I don't know how they did it, but somehow, and I remember like Ian and Perp and like a couple of those other guys did it, and I have no idea how they did that split, but there was that 10-man. But I mean, so I'm thinking to some of the characters, and we have like memes for days that just persevered the entire expansion. So we have frickin, which was one of Wiccan's friend group, and this is, you know, a downfall of our guild being semi-casual, and it, you know, persisted through the expansion. But originally we started as straight up main spec over off spec, which means, you know, if you can like use it, you can roll on it. And it's not an optimal loot system whatsoever, and it caused a ton of drama. Originally in Naxx, we had main spec over off spec, so people were just rolling on anything. And so mana per 5 gear, which is like regen gear that's meant specifically for healers, like DPS players were just rolling on it as a free-for-all. So we had that meme. We had a Shot of Earth coming in on his Warlock and like sniping gear. It was an absolute free-for-all Wild West. But we had so many good players at that point. We just, you know, and the content, again, like what you're saying, was easy. But we just absolutely destroyed it, and people were parsing, you know, just having a good time. And our first 3 Drake, I remember, we 4-healed it, which at the time was
Pause.
bonkers.
Tell us what 3 Drake is. Tell us what that means.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in Tier 1, there were 3 raids. So there's Naxx, which was the big raid. I have Eternity, which was, you know, a single boss fight. And then Obsidian Sanctum, which was the other one. And that was the only one that really posed a challenge. Because you could scale the difficulty of it based on the number of like side bosses that you left up, because they'd help him in the fight. And so if you left 0 up, it was super easy. 1 up, it became a little bit harder. 2 was somewhat challenging, and then 3 was the hardest part of that tier. And so we did 3 Drake. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 weeks in. I can't remember specifically, but we ended up 4-healing it. And this was, I think, one of my lowest moments of the entire expansion, because we're 4-healing it, and I'm just like cranking heals out. Like I feel like I'm cranking. And then I died to like 12 void zones that night, which the boss will just put on the ground, and if you stand in them, you just instant die. Like there's no way you can survive.
Big circular purple things, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm so focused on healing that I can't avoid these void zones because I'm just bad. And so we eventually kill it, and I remember, you know, broke me. I'm like opening trade with people and being like, "Here's gold for your repair bill. I am so sorry. I'm so bad at this game."
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, I healed really well, but it was the raid awareness just wasn't there yet. Because I mean, you know, you haven't played the game in so long. It's like it takes a sec to get back into it.
Yeah. That first phase, I feel like, was mostly just like getting used to playing WoW again and like having a lot of buttons to press and stuff. And then pretty quickly afterwards became like, okay, now I want to like really progress and get better. And of the 12, I mean, like that core group you mentioned earlier was really the people that wanted to be good and to improve and be better. And there were certainly other people in the guild that didn't care as much about that, but I think that's just to kind of touch on that again. I think that was a big reason why a lot of us stuck around, is because we were like-minded that way. But yeah, phase one was a hoot. There was certainly a lot of personalities there that I'm sure we could spend so much time on, but some of them persist into the other phases. So as everybody in the guild knows at this point, phase 2 was really the thing that you constantly talked about, which is the release of Ulduar, which for a lot of people in WoW's history regard as like the best raid ever released. And there's reasons for that we can get into. But I remember even before even before Wrath of the Lich King was announced, you had talked about wanting to play to re-raid Ulduar, and I back in the day hardly ever cleared any bosses in Ulduar. Like I don't think I ever killed Yogg. In fact, I know I didn't. I never killed Algalon, and I remember that back in the day, especially with, you know, this is pre like This is like in tank spot days on YouTube, where like thanks for watching my movie days. But that was a very big feat of strength in my mind, was to kill, you know, those last two bosses. So I was pretty excited myself, but you were on a whole nother level. So tell us a little bit about you going into phase 2. We complete phase 1, going into phase 2 again, some of the memories you have and maybe some of the personalities you remember. So
here's, you know, many reasons why that raid is the best of all time, but just personally, for me, you know, like I'm pretty sure you know this, but most people know this. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So, you know, his whole thing is madness and tentacle monsters, and you know, it's literally what Ulduar's built on. Because the big bad boss in Ulduar is Yogg-Saron, who's named after Yogg-Sothoth, which is one of his, you know, big tentacle monsters. But the whole, I don't know, madness thing and everything like that, it's just an awesome raid. And you can feel the difference, like the step up from basically every other raid that's happened. Once you set foot in Ulduar, it's just on a whole different scale. I mean, you go in and you're in this, you know, whether you love it or hate it, the vehicle combat. And I personally, I think the first boss, Flame Leviathan, is a fantastic fight. One of a kind. I feel like that's a controversial take. It totally is. And some people absolutely hate it, but that fight is so unique. And it's just, it, you know, it takes, like, once you outgear it, it's easy, but it takes so much coordination at the beginning and just unique. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, you know, the first taste into Ulduar. And the first night, you know, unfortunately with our raid schedule, you know, we raided Wednesday, Thursday. And so the first night we go in every time it's a Thursday. And so we only have like 3 hours to get as much as we can. But even still, just setting foot into the door, it's like, yep, this is it. That's why we're here, boys. And little did we know that was actually going to be the case, but keep going. Yep. Well, yeah, and you know, the cool thing about Ulduar is it's similar to the Obsidian Sanctum 3 Drake that we talked about, where a lot of the bosses have a scalable difficulty. And so you can make them harder, and they drop better gear and loot if you make them harder. And so that was the cool part about it is, you know, if you're just a scrub guild, you can go in there and just kill them on normals and do your best. But if you want to actually challenge yourself, you can take on the hard modes. And it was fun to actually progress through a raid and not just go in and one-shot everything. And so, like, each week, you know, we'd add another one. And I remember in Discord at the beginning, you were posting all of, like, the Geordie video guides for hard modes, like back in Naxx. And Cress is like, yeah, I don't think we're going to be doing any of those quite yet. That's right. So, but, I mean, I think, you know, we pushed them. And the hardest parts going into Ulduar initially for high charisma, and this was every guild, was there was a massive influx of players at the start of Wrath. And then a lot of the people that just wanted to, like, tourist it, they died out towards the end of Naxx. And so we, at one point in phase 1, we had like 17 people on the roster. And going into Ulduar, we had maybe 25, but it was rickety. Mm-hmm. You know, we had like 4 or 5 people that just really didn't quite belong. You know, not saying that they can't play the game, but just, you know, you have to have 25 like-minded individuals to really succeed. And they were the casual part of our semi-hardcore like group. Yep. Yeah, and so, you know, that was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning, which if we wanted to get into characters, there's some characters there. Yeah, we're going to get there. So this is also around the time when, like you said, you know, Crescent's mentions like, yeah, we're probably not going to do these hard modes, which I think for everybody, or at least that core 12 we talked about, I think was a bit of a surprise because we had all felt like, you know, phase 1 was pretty easy and didn't really require any amount of, like, you know, education beforehand. You could just kind of show up and have the boss explain to you, and then you just face roll it. But yeah, like, Ulduar was definitely the first step up in difficulty, like you mentioned, and it was such a beautifully designed raid because you had normal difficulties of each boss, but then you also had hard modes that you could activate in the middle or just before you would pull the boss, which is a really, really cool mechanic that I actually don't know enough about
about like WoW expansions to know if they ever really went back to that.
To my knowledge, it's never been replicated because it was too much effort to design it, and so they switched to kind of the TOGC ICC model, where you just switch it to heroic, normal, mythic, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's right, because I think I've heard that before. But so this is the time where there's a bit of a division, I feel like, amongst our group, and there's a lot of like back channels talking about like, well, I don't know, man, like I really came here to do hard modes. I don't want to just do normals. Like, we're going to be done with that pretty soon. And I think, tell me, so this is at the time when Crescents then hands off raid leading to you, but tell me a bit about that experience.
So I will tell you about that, because that is a hilarious experience. So a week before Ulduar happens, you know, I get pulled into the secret channel in High Charisma's Discord, and I know absolutely nothing about Discord. I don't even know you could have secret channels, but I just get yoinked into the secret channel. And it's, you know, Crest and some of his other buddies, and you know, they're just like talking, BSing, all that, and they're like, so do you want to be an officer? And I'm like, I don't know if I do, because I don't want to lose being one of the boys.
Yeah.
And that was very important to me. And I literally told them that. I was like, I don't know if I want to, you know, not just be one of the guys. But I decided, I was like, you know, maybe I can kind of be like the voice for the boys. So I'm like, all right, I'll be an officer. And like you were saying, I mean, I'm obsessed with Ulduar. Like, even to this day, everybody else is burned out, and I'm over here like throwing together Ulduar runs because I just miss it. And so I'm watching every video, every fight. Like, I'm trying to watch live streams of the PTR and, you know, figure out how to do all this stuff. And so we go into Ulduar. We have all 25 people in the raid. We are mounting up on our vehicles to go kill Flame Leviathan, and Crest says, oh, by the way, Duwerq's raid waiting tonight. And I said, okay, all right, I guess that's it. And ever since then, I've been pretty much the raid leader for High Charisma. And so I was, you know, just an officer, but I was the raid leader since that point. So week 1 Ulduar.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like we've talked about this before, and I know that I've talked about this at length with a lot of other people in the guild, but it kind of felt like that was that was meant to happen. Like, it was always going to happen, not just because it was Ulduar and you loved it and you knew a lot about the raid already, but it was just that, you know, you played a healer and you were good. I don't know if there was moments where we saw this already, but you were very good at like knowing each of the class's abilities to call out like rotations with defensive abilities and like big cooldowns and stuff. But like I said, I don't remember if you had done anything in Naxx related to that. But the moment that you were raid leading in Ulduar, it was like, oh yeah, like we would not have cleared Ulduar if it wasn't for Duwerq. And I mean, good on Crescents is as easy as it is to just like, you know, give you 100% of the credit. Like, I really props to Crescents for recognizing that was a good call. So yeah, it was really interesting. And as a friend of yours in real life, it was like, I don't know, it was like I think I've said this to my wife, like, it was a proud moment for me. It was like, yeah, I always knew he would be a good raid leader. And it was fun to be able to talk about that, you know, in between raids when we would hang out in real life.
That's what I was just thinking about that when we had you guys over for dinner, and you're like, did you tell her?
Oh,
and
that's...
I'm like, did I tell her what? I was like, did you tell her that you're like, you know, raid waiting and you're getting the first legendary? And I was like, yeah, babe. And she's like, wow, that's really cool. And you were like, no, this is a big deal. This is really big. Because I mean, you know, like I had no intention whatsoever of raid leading or GMing or anything like that. It just almost happened because I was like, you know, I like this game. And so I put effort into it, and it just felt like it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and I knew that the reception wasn't going to be, you know, like, oh wow, like as proud as I was, obviously, but I did want it to be a moment that, you know, I highlighted, even if it was just for fun, like, you know, haha, look at this thing. But it's also because, and I didn't realize this at the time, but like, I think it's a good thing I said something, because you ended up spending so much time doing like raid prep and dealing with people's drama and like handling a lot of communication about, yeah, just like in guild fighting and all this stuff, that it almost became a second job.
It 100% was. It was an unexpected, and you know, I don't think it was intentional, but once, you know, I assumed the raid leader position, it was like all of the drama went to me. And I don't know if it was just that, you know, because I was leading the raid, but it felt like that was kind of the moment where everybody was like, oh, let's, you know, send it to him.
Yeah. And I think there's a few reasons why that happened, just looking back on it. I think, like you said, you know, you were one of the boys, and so I felt like people could relate to you a little bit better than those who had joined the guild and Crescents was already the guild leader. But you know, Crescent's always had his like tight-knit group of people that he had played EverQuest with and stuff, and it's nothing to take away from him as a guild leader. I actually was really sad when he eventually left, which we'll get into in just a second. But like, I really liked Crescent's, and I, more than anything, just wanted him to stick around and play, even if he did hand off, you know, you raid leading and stuff. But you know, the writing was on the wall during Ulduar that there was a lot of people who became less and less interested in that phase and ultimately the game. So tell me a little bit about, so you eventually become the GM, and I think it's during phase 2 that this happens. So tell me a little bit about that, and then we'll get into some of the characters of this phase.
So, yeah, and I remember it pretty vividly. Which, yeah, same thing. I loved Cress, and I didn't think that he would stop playing. You know, he kind of shifted to the background a little bit, because it seemed like, you know, he enjoyed Wrath, but it was never going to be his primary game.
Yeah.
You know, he put like, I don't know if it's Final Fantasy VIII. I don't even know which one it is, but he just, you know, he's one of those that like plays a bunch of games, and I'm the opposite. I hyper focus on one game, and Wrath was that game for me, and so I was, you know, hyper focused on it. And so I do need to give a little shout out before that to, we were always, you know, just kind of struggling for bodies. And so we kind of, what led up to this is there was, you know, a decent amount of drama, but it was Melindel and his buddy Securum, and there was maybe one more, but they basically were just like, hey, we're gonna go join a different guild, like, you know, this isn't for us. And Melindel was one of the like better players. He had a lot of mental lapses and stuff like that, but he was a better damage dealer. And so that was a huge loss. We lost his friend, and then I'm pretty sure we lost one more at the same time, and so we were just hurting bad. And I think it was either Perp or Shout, and they were spamming trade chat, and they get one of the other guilds is disbanding, and their name's Midnight Mediocrity. And so from there, we get a massive influx of talent. From, I mean, so we had Jewish, Sam, Deez, Soful. Trying to think of.
Yeah, it feels bad to not remember them all, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip one, but it's like we had a massive just influx of such talent. It was amazing. And so with that allowed us to knock down my favorite fight in the entire expansion, which is Hard Mode Mimir, also called Firefighter. So we knock that down, go over to Algalon. It takes us like 2 weeks, but we kill Algalon, which is, he just is a very, very difficult boss. And so that was kind of the, even though it's not the hardest boss, so Yogg 0, which is like the hardest mode of the end boss in there, he's the premier boss of Ulduar. But Algalon is kind of equivalent. And so we killed Algalon for the first time. And that was the moment when Cress was, he sends me just kind of a super weird message that's like, hey, if you could promote any one person to be an officer, who would that be? And I was like, no doubt it's Lionheart, who's, he plays Resto Shaman for us, and I'm a healer, he's a healer, and, just got along really well with him, but he's kind of been one of my good friends since basically the start, from even TBC. And so I'm like, Lionheart, no doubt. So we promote Lion, And then basically like an hour later, Cress is like, hey guys, I'm stepping away from the game. Which, you know, when that happens, it's like, oof, that's a blow.
Yeah.
And I remember he left it like open-ended, and I was like, does anybody want the guild? And I was like, you know, I'm like, I feel like I should be the one to take it, but I don't know if one of his friends wants it. I don't know if somebody wants it, and so I just kind of left it up, you know, up in the air. And I was like, if nobody else wants it, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Even though it's like I basically assumed that it would be, and so he passed GM to me, and then at that point it was, you know, GM and raid leader.
Yeah, and kind of the rest is history, but obviously we'll get into that history. But yeah, there's so much that happened in phase 2 that I feel like set up the rest of the expansion for us. Like obviously joining High Charisma to begin with was the start of that journey, but like that influx of people from what was it? Midnight
Mediocrity.
Yeah, Midnight Mediocrity. Like that carried us for the entire expansion. Like if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been able to kill hard mode anything. So, it feels like.
Yeah, we had our like core 12 that, you know, had been with us literally since week 1. And so since week 1, basically until the end, we had those 12, and then we gained about 7 from Midnight, and then we fluctuated, you know, we floated about 6 players, you know, just here or there that would come, but we had about 19 that were just rock solid from those two groups.
Yeah, and they were, again, those guys ended up becoming like to the end of the expansion, like really core guys and just really fun people to hang out with. And I remember like one of the things that I loved the most about playing WoW this time around was that it wasn't just that we had like cliques of people. I mean, certainly we did, but like it felt like the clique got a lot bigger, and so we were hanging out a lot after raid and just talking, and you know, we'd do dungeons together and other sorts of like, you know, activities. But that was the thing that I knew was like, man, these guys are going to be friends. Like we're going to be friends with these guys for a long time. And obviously, you know, a year and a half or whatever it was a long time. And so, and in that process, you mentioned, you know, you talked about we were really struggling for players. Our roster took a big hit between phase 1 and phase 2, which was pretty much true between almost every phase. I know that Ulduar was like a big dip, just because it was the hard, you know, it was hard and people didn't want to try that hard at the game at that point. But there was definitely some characters that we brought in, and yeah, I feel like we got to mention some of them for the people. Starkin, he was a Moomkin that I had brought in, a Druid Moomkin, who I had brought in, that I was just, you know, there was a lot of us at the time in between phase 1 and 2 that were spamming, or maybe it was just as phase 2 started. We were really struggling. I think there was even a couple raids that we only ran like 19 out of 25 people. And so I was
17 in P1. 17 was our lowest.
Yeah, so we were really struggling. But I remember messaging in like trade chat or looking for group, like we were looking for players, and Moomkins at the time were like really hard to come by. And so I remember he messaged me, and you know, for those who don't know, to help us like weed the bad players from the good, we use this website called Warcraft Logs, or WoW Logs for short, and it's essentially a website that allows you to track your performance on like particular boss encounters and compare your performance to others and whatnot. And so he had, and those are called parses, but he had really good parses. And so I was thinking like, oh yeah, this could finally solve our issue. But one of the things that we had listed very explicitly in our recruitment process was in our Discord server, we'd invite people, we'd message with them back and forth, and then we'd say, okay, well, if you want to fill out an application, join the Discord server, and then, you know, finish your application there. And so one of the things that is very explicitly stated in that application was, do you understand that you have a lower loot prio or lower loot priority in the first week of your recruitment, and you have to say yes to this. And I know that like after this experience in particular, we like, I don't know, maybe doubled down or rephrased or bolded the text or something, but we get this guy Starkin in there, and we go through 1 lockout's worth of raids, which is just a 1 week period of time. We do the raid 1 time, and I think it was on Thorum, but I don't remember if he was like the first boss like of those bosses that we did, like of the keepers. But we get to that boss and we kill him, and I guess there was some communication in the back end of like him like, yeah, but like I'm a pumper, like, so give me loot, And I think there was an item that dropped. It might have been Scale of the Fates, which is like a big DPS trinket on that boss fight. I don't know which it was, but something dropped. He didn't get it because there were other people who obviously had more priority than he did. And he immediately left the raid and we G-kicked him. So I don't know if you were the one that was talking to him at that point. Do you remember what?
It was Crest.
It was Crest? Okay.
I was dealing with it.
Yeah, so he was my, I feel like of the core people in the guild, we each kind of have a blemish on our record of people we recruited. But I don't know who recruited Roslyn. That's one that we have to talk about.
So, I think Roslyn falls on Blau.
I think you're right.
But honorable mention, just I don't have to go into him, but Joe Bryan, I need to immortalize the name.
Yeah,
so we don't lose Joe Bryan, but he doesn't. I'm not going to go into him.
Sure.
And then, so to clarify, so here's why Boomkin is so good and why I'm obsessed with it and why I try to have like 3 in every raid. But they bring 5% crit buff, a 3% hit buff. They wear leather, which is undisputed, basically it's theirs. They also have 13% magic damage, which was harder to come by because we never really had an unholy DK. And then they also have a battle res and an innervate, which gives you mana. And
huge.
It's just
all huge.
It's an unbelievable. And back then they did really good damage too. So this is the class. And so we got Gatherfly and Roslyn. And so we'll go into Roslyn first. So Roslyn's a mage, and man, he's just bad. And he can kind of feel the writing on the wall that we're like, dude, this guy is he's not it. So going into the Warcraft logs, I mean, he's at like the very bottom. And
of not just in our guild, but like of everywhere, anywhere, ranked across the world, like the bottom, like 0 to 1%. It's like really bad.
So, and that these boom kits, I can't talk enough about, how we need boom kits, how great the boom kits are, because they're like irreplaceable almost on the buffs. Like you have to have 3 different classes that bring one of each of their buffs to try to even run a raid comp, and even then your leather's just going to rot. So he was just kind of sitting there, and I was like, yeah, I mean, the good thing about Boomkins is that they wear leather and they basically just get all of the gear for free. And so he takes this statement right there and says, you know what, I'm gonna boost it. And he pays like, I don't know how much it is, like $50 or something.
I don't remember.
To boost his druid to 70, power levels it through Alterac Valley, which, I mean, props for him. Like, the man did it. The man committed.
Yeah.
And gets it to 80 in time for our next Ulduar, under the assumption, wrongly, that he will get 100% prio on the caster loot. And so we go in, and his gear, I mean, he is like in just greens, like leveling greens. And so I remember on Warcraft logs, it shows, and it's like, there are no other parses at this item level. Like, we brought him in just fresh because we needed the buff so bad. And so he comes in, and I mean, like, you can't even see him. Like, the tank, who does the least damage typically, he is like half of his damage. Can't even see him on there.
There's like healers that were doing more damage than him, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm sure Goku was smiting or something and was smoking him on something.
Yeah.
But just bad, and he's just kind of an annoying person in general. And the second that he doesn't really get loot prio, he gets upset, but I calm him down and explain it to him. And then, again, he's bad, but we recruit a couple of people to kind of fill the spots. And so this week, we have 26 people, and he starts spamming, like, invite, where's my invite? And I don't tell him yet, because I'm like, well, I want to make sure we actually, have 25.
Yeah.
And so we get 25, and he loses his mind. Absolutely goes ballistic. And so, he's spamming trade chat, and I can't remember what he said in G chat that we eventually just guild kicked him. And
he said a lot of things. I mean, I'm sure you can remember some, but whatever is not appropriate for YouTube, I'll bleep. But I'd love to hear you recall some of them.
So, I mean, I don't remember him in G-Chat. I remember the whispers.
Oh,
But he
that's
calls
right.
us, unloyally C-word, which I won't go
Yeah,
into because I'm
that's
sure I'll be believed. That's like his famous one. And then he
like not in,
tells me,
grammatically incorrect.
oh yeah,
Like, by the way,
unloyally,
yeah.
unloyally. And then goes into, he tells me to eat my service revolver. And then what else did he say? I can't remember what he said to other people.
Oh, it
But
was a lot of MFers and just like, yeah, terror. I don't know. It was a lot of personal insults. And he messaged, he pretty much messaged everybody. But I even remember that night, people were feeling a little left out who didn't get messaged. They were like, "What, was I not important enough to get one of these whispers from
did I
him?"
not just
Yeah, he was a lot. And I think it's important to preface that, especially with you at the helm, I mean, even Crescents, I should say, we weren't a guild that was like super hardcore enough to like not bring people based on performance, because for the most part we struggled to have 25 people in a lot of the lockouts that we, in a lot of the raids that we ran. And so, and I know that you took a lot of flack for that. You kind of kept at bay as best you could a lot of people who were messaging you, and even myself included, like talking to you in real life and in DMs, by being like, "Hey man, this guy is absolutely anchoring our progression. Like, he needs to not be brought." And it was always the Boomkin thing. It was like, he's just bringing buffs we don't have. Like,
man.
yeah. And so we put up with it for a while, and it wasn't even, like you said, it was just this one lockout where we had 26 people and we were going to bring someone else in. And I don't even know if it was strictly based on just performance, but it was just like this other person hadn't gotten a chance to play yet or something. And we brought him and he just lost his mind. Yep. And kind of like, yeah, self-reported, like, "Oh, I'm actually a loser." Like, so that was wild. And it was also frustrating because we really tried to help him. He asked me for help on the, on DMs and stuff. And I spent at least a couple hours trying to tell him how to play a mage and like certain boss fights and stuff, like tricks to do well. And for him to just kind of throw it all under the, by the wayside off of one night was wild. But he was a guy that we mentioned like for the rest of the expansion.
Yes. Yeah. He was full meme potential.
Yeah. So then tell us about, you mentioned Gatherfly, and then we'll mention Gatherfly, and then we'll talk about phase 3.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing with Gather that we need to mention is Gather's an older guy, and super nice guy. Like, he was super nice, was always super consistent, and he played a Boomkin. And
there's
so
that Boomkin again.
He's that Boomkin, and he's one of the ones that I recruited. And so in WoW, if people haven't played it, most classes have close to like 60 abilities. Right. I mean, you have so many abilities, and in order to fit those on a keyboard, it's really difficult. Mm-hmm. And you have to use alts and shifts and, a bunch of control modifiers. And Gather took the more difficult path, we'll say that. And he played with his left hand on the arrow keys. So not WASD, put those on the arrow keys. And he clicked those 60 abilities with his mouse. And so, we're on Yogg, which is the last boss in Ulduar, and he has a mechanic that you have to face away from him while he's casting it, or you'll go insane, and then turn back towards him and attack him again. And so you have to kind of do this dance.
The hardest of mechanics.
And I remember that, I tried my best at many points in time, and this is probably my flaw, as a raid leader. I was trying to just be nice, and I would tell people, like, everybody look away. Okay, go back. And I try not to use names, do the best I could. But I'd watch. And Perp has the best sound effect. It's, stone moving. And so in WoW, if you turn with your arrow keys, you turn at like a 50th of the speed of somebody that turns with their mouse, which is what every good player turns with their mouse. And so on Yogg, you'd see him just slowly, it takes him like 2 seconds to turn around and then 2 seconds to come back. And it's because, he's got his hands on his arrow keys and he's clicking his abilities. And so I'm like, dude, we got to figure this out. And so I have him like stream his screen to me and like have him keybind everything, and it just doesn't work. You can't teach the old dog new tricks. Like, I spent hours with him trying to get him better, but that was always his downfall, was that he could just never actually do it. And in P3 we had a falling out with him, but it was just, that was the funniest part about him, is I will never forget the left hand on the arrow keys. Somehow trying to play this game. Like, I've never heard of anybody even considering playing that way.
Yeah, it was definitely unheard of, and this is again at the point where personal accountability actually has a big impact on the raid's like ability to kill bosses. And so, because in this fight in particular, if you don't turn around in time, then you get mind controlled and you start attacking your teammates. And so, like, it wasn't, in phase 1, a lot of people's individual skill didn't matter as much because the content was so easy. But now it really matters, and you can't really like ignore the fact that people just can't turn around quickly. And so, I mean, Ulduar was the birth of so many memes for our raid, especially with the call outs that you were making, like, look at your screen, like, and people just not even like, as if they have their eyes closed playing the game. It's like, look at your screen, get away from square, and just like herding cats the entire time. And yeah, just watching people just fail at the most basic and simple of mechanics. So yeah, Ulduar was definitely where like the core got tighter, and there was a lot of like funny moments from that. So phase 2 ends, and this is, I feel like, where the roster boss really killed us.
I actually thought we were good in P3.
Oh, really?
P3 we were strong.
Oh, you're right. Going into P3 we were strong. I think it was from P3 to P4 that we really struggled, but we'll get to that. But yeah, I think we kind of, that's right, because I remember now I think we were feeling pretty good about the fact that we had killed Algalon, like relatively. I think it wasn't super quick, right? Because I didn't remember us killing it in 2 weeks, but
oh no, it definitely wasn't 2 weeks. It was months, but relative to the phase, I mean, Ulduar, which, some people, not me, were upset about, it went for like 7 months. I mean, it was significant. And so I feel like we killed Algalon 2-3 months in, which sounds like a long time, but especially in that raid, there was such a massive discrepancy in gear. Like, as you geared up, it just, actually made stuff. And so.
Well, and I also felt like, before each phase, I think you and I especially would talk a lot about how you were thinking and feeling about our ability to kill certain bosses. And I remember Algalon being one that was like, I don't know if we'll even get it, dude. Like, we might not kill this boss. So I was pretty happy about that. And again, a big shout out to the Midnight Mediocrity group that came and made that possible. But so tell me then about what you remember about phase 3 and what that was like.
Real quick with the Midnight Voice, and I love this. I still don't know how. They're a group of incredible players, and somehow they had never killed a hard mode boss in their own guild. And so it was like this perfect union, because they got to come and we started just smoking hard mode bosses, but then they also gave us the bump to, finish off. And so it was just like, it was perfect. Mm-hmm. Most of the time guild mergers don't ever, like, they never work, but somehow
they
that
remain clicks.
Yeah. And, I feel like everybody assimilated perfectly and everybody got along great. So, all right, P3. I remember P3, the biggest thing that I was worried about was I was going out of the country for the first week. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, how do I kind of prepare? And, you don't want to, like, it's somebody else. You don't want to raid weed off somebody else's, like, plans.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, guys, just do your best. And Lion has, I think it was Deez that made the meme of Lion with the TV cart as the substitute teacher. And so Lion's kind of, my right-hand man that runs stuff when I'm out. But he just, it just depends on the amount of effort that you want to put in. Lion, he did good. So they called him the substitute teacher because
it's okay. We can say that Lion didn't do a good job, but it was still hilarious nonetheless. And I should say he didn't do a good job of the prep beforehand. He did totally fine in the actual, like, because there really wasn't that much to do. But
I just thought it was funny because the quote that everybody says is, well, do what you did last guys week.
Last week, guys, do the same thing.
Whatever you did last week, do the same thing.
That was the entire call before every boss was just, well, wherever you guys stood, stand there. Like, we had new people that weren't there last week. Like, where do I stand? And so that's what birthed the substitute teacher, like, TV cart meme, where like a sub comes and they don't actually have a curriculum or an agenda. They just bring out like a Bill Nye the Science Guy show or something.
So ToC is a different, so the one in phase 3 is a very different raid compared to the rest of the expansion, because there's no trash, which is like the big packs of mobs that you should basically just go through to get to the bosses. There's none of that, and there's only 5 bosses total. And so it's super short, like in and out. If you know what you're doing, you're done in like 25-30 minutes. If you don't, first night obviously it's going to take 3 hours. Early weeks it's going to take a couple hours. So week 1, I know you guys went in there, and I'm just like, it was like a 12-hour time delay, and I'm looking at Warcraft logs like, how are they doing? How are they doing?
like a parent away from their kids.
Bad. Yeah, bad. It was just like, I wonder how they're doing. Whatnot. And so I know you guys got 4 of the bosses on heroic, and then killed a noob on normal. And there's a pretty steep difficulty curve on the last one, but honestly, for the size of the raid, it's a really good one. And so I came back week 2, and we just, crushed it, killed all 5, which, it's an easier tier, but it's still, like, that still was a feel-good accomplishment. But, because it was such a short raid, it actually led to probably one of my favorite parts of the expansion. And so that formed the birth of High Charisma GDKP, because we usually only raided Wednesday, Thursday. And this raid was so short, it was 30 minutes. We were done Wednesday night in like 30 minutes. And so everybody was like, well, I kind of want to do something else. And so on our second night of Thursday, we started running a GDKP, which I know it's, people aren't going to play WoW, so they won't know exactly what that is because it sounds silly. But it stands for Gold Dragon Kill Points. But basically the way it works is you buy items with the in-game currency or gold, you pool it all together at the end, and then you guys split it. And it is the best loot system. It's just like unequivocally the best, especially for pugs.
And why is that? So, maybe explain that.
So with, the normal system of like a main spec over off spec where you just roll for the items, there's always drama. Somebody, he shouldn't be able to roll on that.
It's not as good for him as it is for me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's, or favoritism or soft reserves. I know we had a drama with the soft reserves in ToC, which I'll definitely go into that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But there's just always some kind of drama, and if one person, let's say, wins like 4 pieces of loot and the other person hasn't won anything for 4 weeks, they're pissed and they're like, why am I even coming and playing this game? And so with the system where you all pool your gold together and then split it at the end, no matter what, you're a winner. Either you paid for the items that you wanted and you won them, or you get the gold at the end.
Yeah, and you upbid people to increase the value of that item as well.
Yeah, and so it's like, if you want it, you can win it. Just depends on how much you want it, but then you always get a cut at the end. And so we started doing that on Thursday, and it was just a riot. I mean, this phased. I think I have like 8 alts. And so, I have my warrior tank. I level a 2nd paladin as a tank. I have like, I'm running stuff on feral druid and just like all these weird classes that I don't really play.
Just to make money or just to run these?
No, just to have fun, because I miss, I love the game.
Yeah.
And I love playing it. And so, it was just fun to have people on stuff that they don't play. And they were, even people that didn't have alts, I feel like were just running them. And so that was an absolute riot, and it definitely made a big jump into the last phase.
Yeah, I wish I had gotten in on it a bit more, because I did a couple of them, but not just for the reason that it would have been nice to have that much money, because like you really do, when you're running it that often, you make quite a bit of gold that pretty much lasted the rest. I guess not so much your case. You ran out of gold quite a bit, it sounded like.
All the time.
But normally it would last you for a long time, because, an average purse, we'll say, in WoW, if you're not playing GDKPs, could be anywhere between like 1,000 gold on the super low end to like maybe 30,000 gold if you're like farming. But like in GDKPs, if you ran, 2 or 3 in a week and did that for months, you would have hundreds of thousands of gold, which really, just as a side note for those who don't know, kind of put Blizzard in a weird position with trying to figure out, do we need to step in and do something about this, which they eventually did in one of the other versions of their classic games, which is just interesting. But so you run GDKPs. Yeah, this is kind of where, at least in my mind, you started playing like 4 or 5 days a week, and you were doing that quite a bit in phase 2, but I don't know if it increased since then.
In P1 I did it, and wife was like, I don't know, you're like, you're playing that game a lot. And then I feel like in P2 I was running Wednesday, Thursday, and then I did Friday. And I need to do a shout out to AZ, who ran the Friday midnight GDKP that I got the legendary on my priest in. And the reason I mentioned him is he taught me a lot about just like actually running a good GDKP, because without going into the weeds, there's a lot of them that are very, for lack of a better word, corrupt and like bad for the game. And they're toxic, and like, they'll force people to pay way more for an item that... like upbidding on items that you can't actually wear and stuff. A warrior will upbid on a cloth just to screw somebody over because they think it should go for more. And there's just a lot of stuff like that. And he kind of taught me, hey, just run it like, like the boys. Like, just run it for like a group of friends. Mm-hmm. And so, that was important going into it.
I also wanted to ask too, like, this is a bit of a step back, but just really quick before we keep going, was there any like hesitation or nerves on your end when you assumed the raid leader position? Like, was that I mean, obviously in comparison to other things in real life, it's not that big of a deal at all, but was there any amount of like nerves on your end of like, I got to lead these 24 other people to victory, or did you just like, nah, I got this?
So, in P1, I feel like I did like the random hug leading, where I'd be like, yeah, I guess. And I feel like half of them were Lions, where Lion would set the group, and then he'd be so busy like doing the group, I'd just like lead it. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of experience with it. But I think most of it really wasn't nerves. It just kind of came naturally. Like, it just, felt like, well, if nobody's going to lead this, I guess I'll lead this. And so we'll do it.
Yeah. And, go ahead.
I was just going to say the only, not nerves, but I was severely stressed going into the last phase, P4. I guess the P5 existed, but it's one boss. But going into phase 4, because ICC was so difficult, that I was like, man, I really got to study these, and it's a lot of effort to study and have to make sheets and assignments and stuff like that.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about this a lot, but for those who don't know, like the amount of preparation that you put in to make these raids successful was quite a lot. Like, can you tell us a little bit about what you did to prepare for the raids?
Yeah, and it sounds silly and unfun. When you think about like, oh my gosh, like, you think of the amount of effort that you're putting to prepare for a video game. And but most of it is you're watching, because even though it's a re-release of the expansion, the old boss guides that they had out, so here's one vivid memory is, so Tank Spot was the gold standard in original Wrath when it came out, and their strategy for hard mode Memoron was to have 3 priests spec'd into Holy Nova with groups so that they could run around and spam Holy Nova in their groups. And that was like the best guide back in the day. And that's an awful plan. Like, it's just beyond terrible. And so, like, yes, it's an old game. Yes, it's been re-released. Yes, it's been played on, Warmane 10,000 times. But it was still, somewhat unknown. And so you'd have to watch people in the public test realm, and they'd go in and play and, try to figure it out. And so you're like watching live streams, you're trying to watch boss guides, but until you're actually in there, it's just, it's hard to figure out. But then I learned, pretty quick that a little bit of preparation as far as like assignment sheets goes a long way. Mm-hmm. And so in Ulduar, I was doing these like custom copy paste names for, locations. And it took me like an hour before every raid and I'd get them set up, and then somebody would call out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta go back in and, do those. And so I got smart towards the end, and I started doing like Google Sheets. And Google Sheets are the way to go, because you can just assign people, and if somebody drops or, you need to switch, you can assign somebody else. But that's, the assignment sheets. But then there's like, you're calling cooldowns, and you're doing a whole bunch of other stuff at the same time, but that's hard to actually assign. I didn't like assigning those. I actually like just calling those during the actual fight.
Yeah, and I like it's hard to like. I mean, obviously, people who were under you as a member of High Charisma will appreciate me saying this, but like, or at least understand. But that amount of work, I think, was appreciated by all, but not always consciously. Like. Even though it seems silly to spend so much time preparing for stuff that is like 15 years old, it made the run way more like any raid that we did. It not only made it like a lot more accessible to a lot more people, but it actually allowed us to just like clear content that for some of these people was probably the hardest stuff they had done in video games. Like that even though the fights or the mechanics are like can be trivial, it's just the fact that you got to get 25 people coordinated to do it. And so that amount of preparation was always like, I remember you talking to me about it, and just like, it seemed like it was like you were a worry wart and trying to get it put together in time for raids at the beginning. But then it was just, part of your process, like your evening routine before we would raid is just have assignment sheets and where people are standing in certain boss encounters and stuff. And anyway, I just know that I and everybody else in the guild really, really appreciated you doing that. Like it was, I don't think people said it enough, but it was it made a huge difference in our experience.
So I'm looking on my computer, and I have the Anub, which is the final boss in P3, Duwerq. Or no, sorry, Duwerq. I don't know which one it is. He's one of the.
I think it's a Duwerq.
But I'm looking at my pre-pull checklist, and it is 2 full pages to just go through this boss before you even pull him. I mean, we've got stuff of like, I'll make sure the melee are in specific groups that have a heal, and make sure other people have shadow priests in their group and shamans in their groups. And do we have a wound poison? Do we have a nature resist totem? Like, what's our healing assignment? H-Pals assign this, H-Pals assign this. Resto shamans, you can't drop Manatide. It's just crazy to see me typing up this sheet, like this entire checklist. It's just funny. It's funny the amount of effort that went into it. But the funny thing is, especially now that I'm like winding down from WoW, it's like, well, do you feel like you wasted that time? And it's like, not at all. Mm-hmm. Like, it was so worth it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, because it was a fun thing to think about. It was like, I'm preparing. I think people probably, I mean, aside from maybe other gamers, I think the people who would probably relate the most is like people who play Dungeons and Dragons. Like you spend a lot of time preparing for an encounter before you actually roll the dice, and when you do that, it makes the encounter run a lot more smoothly. And at the end of the day, like, it's not fun to not clear the content. It's not fun to spend 2 days, smashing your face against a wall in frustration, not clearing a boss. And as much as it's fun to just hang out with your friends, that's what we're all here for, is to kill the bosses. And so, just definitely really, really appreciated that. And I think that's the thing that, we'll get to it at the very end, but like the big reason why I think everybody really, aside from the fact that we all just love you, it's hard to replace, I think, a guild leader like you. And so, because of all that prep that you did beforehand. But I don't know if there's anything else I don't really remember very many characters from P3 that
P3 we didn't have a ton of drama. The only one of the funny parts about it is we had this guy come in named B-Man, and he ran with Midnight occasionally, and dude was unbelievable at doing damage. And so on the last boss, he got the rank 1 in the entire world parse for marksman hunters.
Forgot about that.
This was like, I mean, it's like a big deal because we were not a parse focused guild. Like, we had some people that were really good, and again, a couple, that didn't take the game quite as seriously. But this was like a big deal to get like the number 1. Mm-hmm. And so he got it. And then like 2 months later, Warcraft Logs changes the requirements of the fight and strips it from him. And
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, stripped it from him because of their like updated rules in the future. And I remember he was, sent him angry emails and everything like that. And then the dude just rode off into the sunset and was like, "See you guys." I don't even know.
I became the #1 in the world, and now I'm out.
Just like peaced out. And we're like, all right, I guess that happened.
Is this the time where Shock Peach's kitchen was set on fire?
Oh my god, no, that's Ulduar. That needs to be. We'll go back to that one. So, Shock Peach, Char Peach, he's got 10,000 names. We'll call him Peach for the sake of this. But Peach is a very good player. And was, and he was part of Midnight and came over. But he was just so flaky. He'd be like, maybe I can be there. He'd come and he'd absolutely crank. But the problem with running a guild is that it's similar to sports where, the best ability is availability.
Yeah.
And if you're not available, it's hard to plan on you. It's hard to make, stuff around you, whatnot.
Especially because some of these people filled out a very important role in the guild.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And it's like, that's just part of the thing with the guild is that it's really hard to replace people last minute, and like obviously real life stuff happens, but it's just part of the game. But so he had called out like 2 other weeks for emergencies, like, oh, my grandma's in the hospital. I'm going to say quote unquote emergencies because it's like you only have so many real life emergencies. Yeah. So like grandma's in the hospital and then something else happened. And then finally, we have 24 people. We're sitting at the, foot of Algalon, like ready to pull him. And I'm like, so you coming? On Discord to him. And he's like, there's a small fire in the kitchen. And, there's a bunch of people that were in his old guild. And so they have him on their like friends list. So you can see him on other characters. And they see that he's on another character with another guild in Ulduar. And so I message him this and I'm like, hey, like, we're aware that you're in this. Like, are you gonna double down on this? And he's like, yeah, and then just ghosts and just disappears from that point.
And he like disappears, doesn't he?
Disappears. Like, yeah. Well, so he was notorious what they call swiper, and so what that means is you can illegally, I say illegally like it's against the law. It's not against the law. It's against Blizzard's terms of service to purchase gold. And so you purchase
third-party
gold.
Sellers and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, you can't buy it at this point in the game. You can't buy it directly from Blizzard. Of course, they changed that later. But you couldn't buy gold directly from Blizzard, and so you'd buy it from like these obviously, Chinese or like Eastern European sites where they have bots and farmers. They go and farm the gold, and so you pay for the in-game currency. And he would spend, I mean, it's got to just be thousands and thousands of dollars on gold and would run the GDKPs to just buy, basically all the items. And so that's what he did, and he got banned for gold buying, and then he disappeared for like a solid year.
Oh, I didn't know he actually got banned.
Yes, he did.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that was also, again, another one of those, we just memed about it forever. Like, oh, sorry, my kitchen's on fire, I'll be there in a minute. Like, anytime we were running late, it's like, oh, my girlfriend started a small kitchen fire. It's one of those where it's so unbelievable to say that is a sign of like a chronic liar, like somebody who just like pathologically lies all the time. And so that was I just thought we needed to take a pause and remember that. But okay, so yeah, now let's talk about phase 4, which phase 4, for those who don't know, is kind of like the crown jewel of the expansion. It was really the hype of the entire expansion with Lich King, or this big, scary knight, being at the pinnacle of it all. And outside of this game, it was kind of for a long time, at least as far as I understood, the kind of the peak of the lore. Like the trilogy of the game kind of ended with this boss. Obviously, there's more lore outside of the games that exists in books and literature and stuff. But as far as I understood, like, original World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade, which is the second expansion, and then this is kind of like the Return of the Jedi for a lot of people. And so Lich King is the end boss of phase 4. and he is no joke. He was no joke back then. He was no joke in current classic Wrath of the Lich King. And so you had mentioned something about this causing you a lot of like stress and anxiety. So tell us a little bit about phase 4 and what it was like from your perspective.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think some of that was like Ulduar. I was just so excited for it. You know, I was taking in the content just because I wanted to. And ICC, which is Icon Citadel, I was excited for it because I love Wrath as an expansion as a whole. But this isn't like my raid that I just I live for, and so that was part of it. And then it's just it's a lot because I mean you're learning how many bosses are in ICC.
Oh,
There's 12. Yeah, 12.
Yeah.
So yeah, your 12 bosses, one's a joke. But the other 11, they all have like a normal mode and a heroic mode. And everybody wants to kill the heroic, as soon as they can, and it's hard, but there's just so many mechanics. It's just daunting to learn. 12 bosses and their mechanics and their hard mode mechanics, and the best strategies are always changing, especially like when a phase first releases. And so it was just a lot of stress to actually come up with, the best strategies. And, there's people that want to go into the PTR, but it was, again, at a time that, like, I couldn't really go into it. And so...
What's the PTR for those who don't know?
Public test realm. And so that's where you can go in and run the raid to check it for bugs, basically. And so, like, all of the best guilds in the world, they go in and they run on this public test realm for like 10 hours a day when it's live. So it'll go live for like 3 days, and 10 hours a day is probably even low. They'll go in and they'll just live and clear the bosses, and then they'll kill everything week 1 and be like, see, everything was easy. And it's like, okay, yeah, but you spent like 70 hours, clearing them on a public test realm. And so, it was, I think that expectation was there for everybody of just like what you were saying with the crown jewel. It's like, I just want to kind of make it special for everybody, but it was definitely stressful going into at the beginning.
Yeah, because there was a lot of guilds that even in original Wrath of the Lich King never killed Lich King. And I know that at least as far as I understand it, was a big driving factor for how Blizzard would handle content in the future. I mean, it didn't seem to influence too much of how they handled Cataclysm, but they wanted... I know that the Lich King and how difficult heroic Lich King was specifically, like, would ultimately influence how they handled raid, like the boss mechanics in the future, because it was just so hard and it was so inaccessible. And I don't remember the exact percentage of the population that killed heroic Lich King, but it was pretty small if I remember right.
Yeah, it was low in original.
Yeah. So then, yeah, tell me, obviously you're feeling this stress, and I know that some of the conversation that we had in person was a lot of like, I just don't even know if we can kill heroic Lich King. Like, I don't know if we'll ever kill him. Even normal Lich King, I don't know if how long it'll take.
I knew we'd get normal, but that's the hard part is, with basically any game, but especially with Classic WoW, is Classic WoW started, and I never played like the original. But everybody that went back, original Classic WoW is very easy.
Yeah.
It's just easy, right? And so a lot of the people that went back to play it, it's like they just blew through the content. And then, TBC, there were definitely some more difficult raids, but kind of same thing. They blew through the content. Phase 1 in Wrath blew through the content. P2 was pretty hard, but, most people killed it. Phase 3 was hard, but then ICC, when it came out, it was like... people might not kill this, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to bang their head against the boss for, and we're not talking like, oh, you don't kill it for 3 hours. We're talking you don't kill it for 3-4 months. Every night you're in there for 3-4 months, 1 to 2 times a week, and you can't kill the boss. Like that's hard for a lot of people to stomach.
And it's also a boss and a raid tier that I think the fear was it was going to disband a lot of the guild members. Like, not that it would ruin our guild per se, but I think part of the concern, at least that I had, was like, we might lose people because we can't kill the boss, and they might join a different guild who can, or just the people who are kind of, holding us back just get so frustrated that they end up leaving, and then we go through another roster boss issue. Because I feel like I think for me, and I'm sure you felt the same way, like more than anything, I just wanted to clear all of the content, and there was nothing that was quite as stressful as the idea of just not being able to do it with the people you like playing with,
Yeah.
because you just can't get 25 people.
Yeah,
And
and
yeah.
the hard part. So with the 25 people, kind of what you're saying is, and we've touched on this several times, but there's people that just take the game at different levels that want to actually push and kill it. And the hard part with ICC specifically is most other raids, if you messed up a mechanic, it would kill you. In ICC, if you mess up several mechanics, it kills the raid.
Yeah.
And so it becomes hard because if, that one person is holding you back, they wipe the raid, and they get the mechanic. It's like, oh, you got the unlucky, and you wiped us.
Yeah. And given our track record with like individuals who just couldn't turn quickly on their keyboard or didn't know how to play their classes, like I know that was a big stressor. And again, we weren't a guild to like boot people based on performance, but I think this was, at least for me, the first time where it's like, hey man, like we need to have a serious conversation about some of these people, because they literally could kill the guild. Like if we spend and better yet waste hours and hours trying to kill a boss that we're just never going to kill because of certain people, like that poses a serious threat to the guild and it making, because I we were so deep into it at this point that I knew that I wanted to finish the expansion with high charisma, and I know a lot of people did too. And so I know that there was a lot of people that were willing to stick it out, but it was definitely, I don't know, scary is a bit hyperbolic to say, but it was definitely like going into it, I think there was a lot of us that felt some stress and anxiety, and there was definitely some characters that developed through that of like, I'm elitist and I'm gonna make it known that I'm better than everybody else,
Yep.
And so we it's funny, like we just finished phase 4 like 2 weeks ago, and there's still so much that I feels like it just went by so quickly that it was like a blur. So yeah, what do you remember about phase 4?
So I remember tons, but Perp was like, week 1, he's like, heroic Sourfang when, and that's the 4th boss. And I mean, the step up on some of these bosses on heroic is bonkers. And he drops like a really cool trinket that changes the way your character looks. And it's like, if you look at all like the lists of like the coolest items in WoW, this is up there on all of them, just because it's such a cool item and it's super strong. And so everybody wanted that. And I'm like, bro, I can't even give you like an estimation on when we're gonna get that, because it's just like, it's hard. And this was at the time, too, where it's towards the end of the expansion, and the people that have played for, a year and a half, and some of them are like, I'm starting to get burned out. But I could tell a lot of people were still just showing up almost because they felt guilty if they didn't. Not because they wanted to, but they were like, well, I don't want to leave them hanging.
Yeah.
And so that was hard for me, because I'm like, man, I don't want to force anybody to be here, because I'm having fun. Like, I play this game for fun. There's people that play it for all different reasons. There's people that play WoW, like, and loot is kind of their driving factor, and they love getting like that upgrade and that dopamine hit from getting it. I've never really had that. Like, that is, isn't my feeling or reasoning. There's people that play it super casually, that just come in to hang out. They're usually drunk or high and they suck. There's people that just straight up enjoy it. There's people that are just beyond addicted to it and they can't do anything else. It's just you. There's tons of reasons, but I mean, I just like genuinely love Wrath. It's just so fun. And so I was like, I'm here just to have fun regardless. But it was starting to become, hard with that, of just like the call outs or, no shows, or you get that message that's like, hey man, I'm going to be done, or just like, I'm moving on from WoW. And you're like, oh, that's like our core position just leaves the game, and it's brutal.
Yeah.
So, but I'm trying to think of some good times that we had, like, when we're first going in, and I'm trying to even think like a specific boss that was really fun.
I have a few memories that I can maybe churn some of yours, but so one of the new things that they introduced in this phase was these these rings that you could get as a result of building up your reputation with the faction that was a part of this this raid. And so before the raid was even like really available, we were trying to run what were called rep farms, reputation farms, so that you could get that as quickly as possible, because the ring that you would get from that was a huge step up from anything you had access to. And so a lot of times the game or the gimmick that people would play is they would get groups together and they would run these rep farms and then go exit out of the raid and reset it, and then just all the creatures that you killed before that would respawn, and then you go and do it again, and you do this as many times as you could stomach, honestly. And I remember that you know, a lot of the groups that ran that at the beginning, since they were, you know, they didn't have great gear, they were wiping on a lot of this content, even though it's easy, especially by comparison to the bosses that you'll fight. But you know, doing this a lot over and over is pretty mindless, so it can be easy to make mistakes that way. But I just always laughed every time when we would run either when we'd run our GDKP runs, where we would wipe on this trash, and we'd always just say, "Oh, this is we rep farming? Is that what we're doing?" And so, I mean, it was just stuff like that obviously, like when you've played games with the same group of people for 18 months, coming up on 2 years, like you just have, I mean, High Charisma, I feel like more than anything was a group of people that had so many inside jokes.
Yeah.
So many inside jokes that just made it so much fun to be a part of. But really, Phase 4 for me was a lot of Phase 4 for me was fun, but it was also challenging because it was really the first phase where I felt like I was doing everything right, and I had still studied, you know, like I normally do for each phase, to try and kill the boss as efficiently as possible, like, and be a good mage in this case. But it was one that I just never seemed to be able to parse really high, which I cared about to an extent. Like, I wanted to be seen as a good player, and that was obviously an easy way to do it. And obviously, without getting into the politics and the weeds of how Warcraft logs tracks certain bosses parsing, it just felt like no matter what I did, I would never be in that top 10%, because either I just wasn't playing as well anymore, or there was just a lot of players at that point that were getting a lot of external help to perform really well. And I remember, for me personally, that was kind of really frustrating, because before we lost several members, you know, parsing and playing well was still, I think, a thing that a lot of people in our guild cared about on the back end. You know, we'd kind of compare each other as players using parses and stuff. And I know Sam in particular did that quite a bit. At least it seemed like. I could be wrong about that,
Yeah.
but so.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, and I was just thinking of one thing that needs to be immortalized, and that is so we had a prop paladin main tank by the name of Allosaur. I don't think he missed a week from week 1 until, you know, like halfway through Phase 4, and he would go on these rants about gear and like the minutia of gear. And I mean, you have things like expertise and, like, you know, it'll help you hit the boss and like hit chance and all this stuff. And we'd be in the middle of a boss, and somehow somebody would like sperm up, and he'd go for like 2 minutes straight on this gear, and I'm trying to like call cooldowns and like tell people where to move, and he's like, well, I might need more experts, you know, if I switch maces it might do this. And the rants were just amazing.
I wish I could do an impression of him, because I can hear it in my head so clearly, of him just having a monologue with himself about gear and gemming and like certain bosses and mechanics, and I it's so funny. It's like, dude, Duwerq is trying to get people to stop talking. Can you stop talking, please?
Just keeps going.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. But so I guess tell me overall, like, how did you feel about Phase 4? Because at this point, something we need to mention is that we had fully transitioned to going to GDKPs, but I don't feel like we touched on that.
I'll go into that. So the High Charisma GDKP, I kept running on Friday, and I transitioned it to, which I did all in ToC. I ran a Friday midnight group, and then on Thursday, that was when we had like the second kind of, guild GDKP, but I had a ton of high charisma guys in the Friday GDKP too. And so we ran that, and we'd have our normal raid night, like, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we had that GDKP on Friday. And so I had a lot of experience, and that group was doing really well. And the benefit of like a GDKP system is if somebody calls out, or for any reason you lose somebody, it is so much easier to find a replacement player than for like a guild run, and you kind of have to explain to them like, here's our loot rules, and people are upset if your guildies are going to be upset if they lose an item to some person that you randomly bring in. So there's just it's just harder to fill, and we started to get to the point where our Wednesday Thursday group was we were starting to struggle to field a solid 25. Like we had, sometimes we have people, but we'd have 3 or 4 that it's like, man, we can't, bring these guys through. And so eventually I made the decision, which, controversial, but I do think it was the right call. And so we transitioned it, our main guild run to a GDKP format. And I hosted it in like a big old server called Top Tier. And we still had, I want to say, immediately that week we lost some like OGs. We lost like J-Dots.
Oh, that's right. Like, I was wondering when we lost J-Dots.
Yeah, so it was that week, and I don't think it was because of that. He was one of those that was hanging on because he didn't want to brick us by
that's
leaving.
Right. Yeah.
Like you could tell that, for a while it was, not that he didn't want to play WoW, but it was just, it's like 6 hours a week.
Yeah. Showing up out of obligation and stuff.
Yeah. So, we lost him. I know Massive, started to lose interest. Rip started to lose interest. And so, yeah, lost a couple, but then we switched it over to that GDKP. And it was, it went a lot, I'd say, better than our guild run. Some people, weren't thrilled that we switched to it, but I think everybody, it went well at the beginning. And in the 2 groups that I hosted, so we had Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday was the meme group, which was the high charisma one. And so we'd be like, well, Wednesday.
We may not be as good as the other ones, but we have a good time.
It was so much damn fun that it didn't matter. We had so much fun. And so throughout it, there was, I don't want to get way off topic, but in Top Tier there was a ton of drama with it's a very elitist server. It's hosted by the best people on the server, and the best guilds and the best raid leaders and the best raiders are hosted in there. And so people, the current leader at the time made a push that was I expect you guys to be performing at whatever the top level is, that you need to be performing basically in the top 75%,
or you'll be kicked out of the
you'll be kicked out. And so all of these raids went to they weren't fun. You'd go to them and they didn't have fun. Nobody talked, nobody laughed, and you'd come to Wednesday, a Wednesday, high charisma, the Duwerq run, and everybody was just having a blast. Everybody's just chit-chatting, we're having a good time, we're still killing stuff, not 100% of everything, but it's a fun group, we're having a great time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Wednesday GDKPs, even though they were memed on, mostly because at the beginning, I should say really for the majority of the time, we just sucked. But I would say that it really wasn't always, and even I feel like most of the time wasn't because of high charisma. It was actually surprising that I felt like we identified, because we wanted to defend ourselves. We wanted to prove hey, we're not the problem here, as much as this is the memed on high charisma Wednesday run, we're not it. And so but it ultimately merged 2 groups together, I feel like, between us and Clean, where we just had a lot of friendships that were established between us. And I know that you and Druggist and Tambi had formed a relationship through, was it AZ's runs initially?
Initially it was me and Druggist and AZ's run, and then you know, it's like Tambi became like, you know, a really good friend. Druggist was a really good friend.
And yeah, I mean, these guys were people you were playing with, you know, like twice a week or 3 times a week. I
Oh,
felt
God.
like, yeah.
Let's see. I mean, this is embarrassing, but yeah. So I mean, Wednesday we had mine. Thursday we had my second one. Friday we had my third one. I guess Thursday, you know, was like our trifecta one. Saturday I'd run Druggist. Sunday I'd run Tambi's. It was like, it was 5-6 days a week.
That's wild. That
Wait a
is so
ton.
many.
Wait a ton.
Yeah. So, okay. That's just an absurd amount. It's like a full-time job at that point.
All right, now that I'm thinking about this transition to the GDKP, so we had a couple great things that happened. So we had Okada, and you know, we transitioned to the GDKP.
Oh, that's right.
Basically, nothing is free and not as like a, you know, a dick move or a power move. It's just that way everybody gets something for their effort. And so the legendary in ICC is called Shadowmourne, which you need to collect 50 fragments basically just from killing like the bosses. And so you'll get these fragments, you know, over time. And then you have to get infusions. So you have to kill the 3 end bosses. You have to do something special on them after you've collected, you know, the prerequisite weapon. And so we have Okada. Okada's been with us since the Midnight Boys came over, you know, all of them. And he finishes his 50 shards. He has like basically everything to go. We're ready to do the infusions. We're walking up to the boss where the first infusion is, and he just like disappears, falls asleep. I have no idea. Literally just like dies in the hallway, and that's the last we see him.
Last we've ever heard of him.
Ever.
Yeah.
We're about to give him this legendary weapon, and he's just like...
Yeah, people wanted for the entire expansion. Like, people talked about Shadowmourne since the beginning of Wrath of the Lich King 2 years ago.
It's just like disparate. And I paid for the whole thing because, you know, like I was saying, nothing's like quote unquote free in them. But, you know, and so like he didn't have the gold for it, so I just like spotted him the entire gold. And so, I mean, I'm trying to think of how much. I think I paid 150,000 gold to complete this weapon,
which is insane. Yeah.
And then just gone, like just disappears, and he never even completed it. If he completed it and then pieced out, it'd be different, but he just like did it randomly. Like, all right, I guess we'll just go on to the next one.
The mystery of the disappearing Okada. Yeah, that was one that we talked about a lot too. It was just, you know, it's like what's the story behind that? I know that something that came of or just before that was that like I guess he had like a thing for gummy bears or something, and he would, or maybe it was fruit snacks. I think it was fruit snacks, and he would just eat like so many that he would get like a huge stomach ache and like pass out. And so I feel like we kind of like the mythology of Okada disappearing was that he just ate one too many fruit snacks and just disappeared forever.
And we're memeing on the guy. He probably just like died in his chair and like literally like, all right,
I'm out. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's wild. But so yeah, and just, you know, I think it should be stated that like that was you paying for that was because the transition between our original guild like loot system to this GDKP to me felt like a big deal. It felt like almost like the guild was dying. There was like sign of disease in it, and we were needing to make a decision fast to like excise this disease. And so like we made this transition, and I remember you saying, you know, these are the things that we're gonna do to ease the blow and stuff, and that was part of it, was to pay for people to get Shadowmourne who had been promised, you know, because you had to decide very early on who was going to get the first Shadowmourne and then the subsequent Shadowmournes after that, because it was a lengthy process. It took weeks, you know, like months. I think I don't remember. Was it like 2.5 months or 3 months when Shout of Earth got his? I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, and they ramped it up towards the end, and so you started to get them quite a bit quicker. But yeah, I mean, it was at least, I mean, about 2 months.
Yeah,
you know, before like the first person would get his.
It's a long time, and so yeah, you don't want to be giving it to somebody who you think is just going to peace out, because it also is a big damage boost for the whole raid when they have it. And so yeah, you want to give it to somebody who's going to use it and stick around. So anyway, that's pretty funny. But yeah, phase four was fun, and I remember, I think like I'll probably remember, honestly, I'll probably remember Ulduar and Naxx more so than I will like pretty much any other phase. Like I think I won't remember phase 3 hardly at all. I know for you that'll probably be different, but like for me, I won't remember phase 3. I'll remember phase 2 really well. I'll remember phase 1 next, and then maybe phase 4. And I only say that because phase 4 was just, it felt like it was a lot of work. It felt like it was less fun, even though killing heroic Lich King for the first time was like a big accomplishment for me personally, and even killing like what's second to last boss called?
Syndragosa.
Yeah, even killing Syndragosa, because I remember you talking about that boss fight like early on before we were, before the phase had even launched. And so it definitely felt like it was the hardest, the most accomplished phase because of how hard it was, but it wasn't as fun as the other phases.
Yeah, and people meme on me, but you go into ICC and it's just like bleak and blue.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the boss fights are really good, but I don't know, it just didn't have quite the same vibes in there. But I mean, there's stuff great, like the way Death Was for Speech that I could recite like by heart. It's just I play that before I get up in the morning. I'm ready to hype.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but I mean, you brushed on it. But the coolest thing about it is, at the beginning of the phase, I was like, I don't know if we will ever get heroic Lich King. Like, I don't know if it's possible. And transitioning, to that format allowed us to keep going and rebuild to the point where we killed it. And we killed it several times. I don't know the exact number, but it felt good to get the people that wanted to stay around, and we got it.
Yeah, and I don't think we would have killed it had we stayed with the guild the way that we had before. Yeah. If for no other reason than we just had people that lost the drive to put in that work, because it is work. It takes people willing to wipe on the same boss over and over. And the guild, we never killed them on heroic, but we put in, I don't know, what would you say, like 150 to 200 pulls on them before we went to GDKP style. I'm not sure the exact number.
Not on heroic. We actually never even got to heroic Lich King before we switched.
Oh, really? I thought we did.
No, we had never gotten Putricide and
that's
Cindy.
Right. That's right.
We were 9. We had 9 heroic kills. And then it was starting to get to the point where it's like, the attrition. And it's similar to Ulduar, but towards the end of the phase, everybody was recruiting because, and this is crazy to say, but I would say the top 50 guilds that started Wrath on Peggle, I mean, there was like 6 of them that were left in their original format. I mean, just people left by the dozens, and most of that was heroic Lich King, like of the top guilds. They just got the floor wiped with them. There's only one guild on Peggle that killed heroic Lich King for like the first maybe 2 months, and it was CB, and everybody else just got destroyed. And so, I mean, guilds disbanded left, right, center because of that, because people couldn't stand a wipe on him for 6, 7, 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
So I think persevering for little high charisma was was great. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I remembered one more thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
It was almost our claim to fame. So in phase 3 in the ToGC, it's the short raid, five bosses long, and there's an achievement that if nobody dies the entire raid, that you all get like a special mount. Nobody on the server had this, and we are on the last boss, and he has this crazy ticking mechanic where everybody's health is ticking down, but if you heal him too much, it heals the boss. And your healers really have to be super disciplined, and then they get a debuff. You have to like instantly heal them or they die. And we're on this boss. We have lost nobody the entire raid. He's at like 4% health. I mean, just about to die. And we lose Goku at like, what are we, 4%? And it would have been high charisma, on the server. People would be like, who the hell is this kill? And we were so close. We were like touching greatness, and then we lost him. Like,
and we never got it again.
Never got it.
Never got it. We
weren't even close another time.
Yeah. That was probably the saddest part about it, was that we kept talking about it every week and just never could do it.
Yep.
So I think this also kind of leads me into some of the some of the memes that came about as a result of your raid leading, which I think the easiest one anybody could call out was the heavy breathing. every time somebody would mess up, or we would like pull early, or not even pull early, but just we'd mess up some kind of mechanic. Everybody just will remember
the disappointed father heavy sigh.
Okay, guys, it's just like this repression of anger that would come, and it was always really funny. But there's definitely times where it wasn't funny, but most of the time it was pretty funny. Or again, like, fish out front, like, just there's so many things that I'm sure I'll have to go back and remember. But well, as we come to the end of this, I want to ask you a couple questions about, I don't know, like, I think for me, if I was in, someone else's shoes who's, probably not going to ever hear from you again, even though they spent 2 years with you, at least some of us, I think they'd want to know a little bit more about just, you, and what it was like what are the things that people didn't appreciate, or rather that was harder than I think people realized, or that you enjoyed the most about being a guild leader for High Charisma. So tell me a little bit about, let's start with that, actually. Let's start with, what are some things that you enjoyed most about leading this group of people?
I think most of it was that it was just like, it was a fun group to be in, and I don't feel like I was ever not still one of the boys, which was cool for me. Mm-hmm. Because that's what I didn't want to have happen, is I didn't really want to be the one in charge. It just kind of like happened, and so it was fun to still be able to hang out with people, and like sometimes you have to make the tough decision, but it was just a fun group of people to go through the whole thing with. And I love the fact that we had those 12 basically from the beginning, and it was just cool to see that for a solid year and 8 months we just kept the same group, and then we had that infusion of 7, and we had 19 people through a year and a half that just stuck through it and stayed with us and had a great time in this which you laughed at me for, but the twice in a lifetime experience. Yeah, that's how I talk about Wrath, because I just love it. I told everybody I'll see him in a Wrath Classic 2.0. Classic.
Yeah, so can we get you to hard commit that you'll be back for Wrath 2.0?
Classic, I'll be there. Yeah, for sure.
That's in what, another 15 years or something?
Yeah. Every 15, I'll do another expansion.
What would you say was maybe the hardest thing? And this doesn't have to be specific to High Charisma, but
mm-hmm.
What would you say was the hardest thing about raid leading, or being the guild leader, I guess?
I don't think it's necessary, with leading, but the hardest part is just having the 25 different, and I say 25, it's not like we didn't have more than people. We had way more than 25 people throughout the course of everything, but just trying to keep everybody satisfied and have fun, because you have the the raid leaders that they're notorious for yelling at people and screaming at people and being super strict, and it's I don't want to play in that environment.
Yeah, that
doesn't sound fun to me, but I needed to be the absolute best that I could, but without being that guy. And so just trying to manage everybody's, the people that are a little bit more hardcore, and the people that are a little bit more laid back, and the people that are driven by loot, and the people that are driven by, just having fun hanging out, and the people that are driven by parses, and just trying to balance all of that. But I think overall it was successful. Obviously there's always going to be a little bit of drama, but I think overall it was successful and everybody had a good time.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's a really good insight, that it was hard to balance all of the personalities and the different motives for playing, and to have so many people, like I said, myself included, insisting on us playing a certain way or being hardcore to a certain level. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things look in the future for High Charisma, and we'll get to that at the end. But what would you say what's the thing you're going to miss the most about Wrath and just this time in your life? Because 2 years is a pretty significant amount of time to dedicate to something, whether it's a video game or not. So whether that's, you know, the game specifically, or just tell me all what you're gonna miss about this.
So this will surprise probably nobody, but it's healing. I live for the healing. Like, and I've said this before. I've said it many times. But if they made like a phone app, if so, you know, this is not your $1 million idea because you'll sell it to only one person. But if somebody made like a phone app that had like health bars and I could just sit there and click on them and like, you know, do the healing spells, I would do that. I love watching the frames go up. Like the dopamine hit that I get from watching like a small bar get big. I don't know what it does, but that's it. That's like the big one. And so, yeah, I had a blast healing. Like, yeah, absolute blast doing that.
That's awesome. Well, I know that everybody's gonna miss you. I would be lying if I said that I didn't cry, like legitimately at the thought. I think, you know, for me, even though we see each other, you know, we have the ability to see each other in real life. I think I shared this with my wife, that it's different to have a game to play where we see each other on a weekly basis and we connect. And I know that everybody else would feel the same, that it's different when you don't spend so much of your interactions catching up every visit, but that you're already caught up and then you just enjoy that time you have together. And I think that's a broader like conversation about being an adult. It's hard to maintain relationships with people, because dedicating time, like a weekly event, every week, spending 2 nights for 3 hours with each other, is something that you really don't ever get to do unless you deliberately set something up for that. And I think that's the thing that I will miss personally the most, because I still plan to play Cataclysm with a lot of these people, and at least give it a shot to see, because who knows, maybe I'll hate it too. But the thing that I'll definitely miss the most is just the time that we had, like, dedicated, uninterrupted every week for you and I to play together, because we didn't spend time having to catch up. We were aware of what was going on already. And again, that's a bit more specific to our situation, but I'm sure the same could be said for a lot of other people in the guild, that they'll just miss that friendship and connection with you. And yeah, being a part of a group that is as as unique as High Charisma was. It really is one of those gaming moments that I will remember forever. Like with a lot of other experiences that I've had, you know, it's just something I'll never forget. So
yeah, undoubtedly. And I mean, that's the fun part for me, is like, you know, with me hyper focusing on a single game, is that I was able to do that, and, you know, with such a good group of people. And I mean, it wasn't, I was gonna say, you know, 6 hours every week for a year and 8 months, but it was more than that with a lot of people.
Yeah, true.
You know, where there were several of us that it's like we did everything together in the game. It's like, you know, if you were on, it's like you were doing something together. So I mean, I'm like Perp and Shout, you know, specifically, it's like, you know, even Cliff and just tons of people, where it's like for tens of hours every week, or you're on Discord. And you know, it was bad for my personal life, because I'm like always checking Discord. I'm like, oh, you know, Discord went off, let me go look at it. And we're talking about like stupid stuff. Yeah, well, but it was good.
I have to ask, just to give you the chance to clear the record, set the record straight, because I'm sure you've gotten a lot of DMs. I've, you know, hassled you about it a lot. Is Duwerq going to try Cataclysm Classic at any point?
We'll see, because right now the you know, thing right now is WoW, the way that I play it, because you brought this up to me before. We were like, why don't you just play like casually? And it's because I can't, right? Like I need to go hard into it, and so I shirk some things for, like, you know, the past year and 8 months, where it's like, yeah, it's time to let's reorganize the life. And so we'll reorganize the life, and when that happens, I can reevaluate and see if, yeah, everybody's having fun, and go check it out.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a more hopeful response than I think a lot of people will realize, because I know that I feel bad. I've gone from like, I don't care, I'm gonna badger him about it, because I am gonna miss those times of us playing every week. But it is a commitment, you know. I didn't play it as much as you, but even still, like, it's a big commitment to to do this as much as we did. And so I totally understand. There's a lot of people who feel like they've neglected real life responsibilities for that sweet window of time. And so I think the nice thing and the positive thing is that at least as of the time, as of recording this video, High Charisma will still be around, which is good. I'm really happy about that, because certainly last week after, or was it 2 weeks ago? Like, it was last week after that Wednesday run, it was definitely emotional. I think, maybe as much as people were, hiding behind jokes, it was an emotional thing to feel like this could have been, that was it for High Charisma. And that was it for this group. And so I know that I left the guild, I joined clean, and then and between then and the next week I had gone out of town, and when I came back I had heard that all of clean like left to join Horde on a different server. So I was like, oh, I don't have a home anymore, which made me even more sad, because I was excited at the fact that like I like a lot of people from clean, and so I thought, oh well, I'll have a new home, I don't have to worry about what's going to happen with that core group, because it sounded like we were all going to leave. And then it was like, oh, we're back to square one. And so I know you've seen me in the Discord trying to like scrounge together a group just to even do 10 mans, but yeah, I think that's kind of the hope in the future is to just like, I don't know if people could dedicate that much time to it again, and I don't plan to do it myself, because I like the idea of having more free time in the evenings. But I am excited that High Charisma will have a home, and that there will be, if people ever decide to log back in, like people like Mithron or
still there.
There's other people who've taken a long break, yourself included, like you'll log in and High Charisma will still be there, and that makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was it wasn't last. I guess, was it this last Wednesday?
It wasn't this Wednesday, but it was the Wednesday before.
Yes, not yesterday, but the week before. Yeah. But it felt complete. And I mean, now I'm thinking about it. I played from week 1 of pre-patch to the very last patch of Wrath, and I feel like I gave it everything. Not like a cheesy like, oh, I gave it my all, but it's like I put everything into it, and I don't feel like I should have done anything more, but I don't feel like I did too much to the point where, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasted that time. I'm like, no, that was awesome. Every bit of it that I put into it, even though, I leveled like a warlock for no reason. I never logged into it after it was 80, but I had fun doing it, and it's like at the end of it, it felt perfect, and it felt like the time to ride off into the sunset and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a good time to take a step back and enjoy life. And yeah, if you like I said, if you ever decide that you want to even just give it a try, it'll always be there, which I think is good. And I guess the last thing I would, it's maybe kind of a lame question to end on, but we, I started conversations in the group, and it, obviously I'm now the guild or the server owner and an officer. And I told Ian and Perp, like, hey, I didn't say I was going to be the guild leader or the raid leader, but so the jury's still out on who that's going to be. But whoever it is there any sorts, given the fact that I know you care a lot about this group, is there anything that you would give? Was there any word of wisdom you would give to the person who would lead such a ragtag group of people?
I think it just totally depends on the level that you guys want to take it, but I hope it's truly just like fun, and whether that ends up being more hardcore or being a little bit more towards the casual side, I just hope that it's fun and people don't play it for any other reason, like, because that's why I played Wrath, and I think that's why I had such a good time. And it is that I never did it out of obligation or any other reason, just because it was fun.
Yeah, and that's pretty special to do that for 2 years. So, well, I mean, you and I, like I said, we'll see each other pretty soon, hopefully. But I know that there's a lot of people who are really going to miss you, and hopefully when things get rebalanced in your life, you can come back and hang out. I think more than anything, don't get rid of Discord. You said that to me or somebody, and
it's going off the phone. I'll check it on the computer.
Okay, yeah, at least Go ahead.
It's one of those where you just like, it takes your attention because you're always just, curious and wanting to check it. And so it's like, it'll be a nice little healthy break to get it off the phone at least.
Sure. Well, whenever, if you decide to add it back, yeah, I think people were pretty sad to hear that you were just like piecing out forever. Yeah. So,
and I'm gonna send a message to basically everybody that was, with us, and I just haven't had a chance yet. But I want to send, just kind of a goodbye to everybody. If this is the end, hopefully it's not. We'll see. But
yeah, definitely take care of things you need to in life, and I'm sure everybody else. Yeah, when you come back, if you do, it'll be a good time. It'll be the right time if you do, so that'll be good.
Hell yeah.
But all right, well, thanks for your time, man. I think this is really fun. I hope you enjoyed spending some time reliving some of the greatest hits. So we'll see you around, hopefully.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Thanks, brother. Bye.